Dakota Rhodes. Sounds like a movie star name. Okay. What don't casual fans know about Chandler's game? What tricks does he have? His ability to cover his range with his lead hand. He does a lot of feeling out with his lead hand. You know, he jabs and tests a lot and sees what his opponent's reactions are. And he's not stingy with his feints as well. You know, he's very good at using a feint, especially if he's already established a target that he'll attack. If he steps in and hits a good jab to the body and hurts his opponent, he registers that and he'll use that feint again to set up something else. So there is an educated nature to Michael's striking, and would be expected with someone like Henry Hooft. He's going to be up against another very intelligent striker as well. It's just a different kind of striker. But Chandler, because his output is lower than Oliveira's when it comes to striking, he has to use precision and distance management to make up for it. Because when he lands with power, and he lands, with precision. I keep saying that same word. He lands with power, he lands on his target, and he tends to hurt, fairly consistently when he lands cleanly. Whereas Oliveira, it's more about wearing you down and finding ways around your guard because you just can't block everything and you're getting overwhelmed. Chandler's going to have to use his feints to hold Oliveira off, and he's going to have to hurt him as well to hold him off, because it might just be like a tsunami. He might just get overwhelmed and find himself running into a guillotine that he knew was coming. And that would be a very frustrating way to win your attempt at a UFC title. But it's definitely possible. Okay. I don't know how long I left these on for. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, this is a long one. This house cat is constantly asking me good questions. Oh, there we go. Okay. What factors do you think go into the various ages fighters peak at? Between Oliveira, Blachowicz, and Chandler, we're seeing fighters who seem to peak later, whereas other fighters tend to have their peak performances earlier. Good question. I think it's a variety of things. And obviously experience is a benefit to everybody. So if you can have 40 MMA fights and not be a mess of scar tissue and broken bones, then you're going to be able to apply that experience. That when you have experience but you don't have the physical capability of applying it, then that's when people start to find their way out to the end of their career. But guys like, heavyweights are good examples. Guys like Olenek and Overeem, they're so skilled. They've been through so many seasons of their career where they've been a grappler and they've been a kickboxer, and then they've done this and they've done that and they've moved around and they've fought for this title and they've won that title. All of that experience goes into each performance every time they step in there. Because you can imagine when Overeem steps in there against someone who's 6'5", he's like, okay, well, I fought this guy and this guy and this guy who was 6'5", and they were all southpaws and they've got a good long striking game. So he has experience to draw upon. And the challenge of getting experience in MMA is not sustaining the damage at the same time. So what we see is the guys that are peaking later. Masvidal's another good example of a guy that's kind of turned a corner recently. Sometimes it's about moving weight class. Sometimes people are fighting too hard against the scales. And I think for Charles Oliveira, that's definitely the case. But I think primarily it's about getting as much experience as you can without taking as much damage as possible. And experience always pays. I always lean slightly towards the fighter with the experience, just because they've got so much to draw upon, so many bad experiences they've been in, bad circumstances they've overcome. And I don't mind a few losses as well, because people learn so much from them. So I think it's different from one fighter to another. Some fighters rely far more on their physical capabilities, which means they peak when they peak physically, whereas a technical fighter will peak maybe a bit later. Once their physical athletic peak has passed, they'll peak later because they've united common sense and maturity with their technical ability. I hope that answered your question. Okay. I'll quick drink again. Okay, right, there we go. Gordon. My name, Gordon. Now, this was a good question. And I did kind of touch on this earlier. But this just allowed me to circle back to it. It's a good question. What's the difference between a wrestler and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner in an MMA bout? In what situations can one style be advantageous over the other? Okay. So the focus of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to submit someone, control someone, and keep yourself safe in circumstances where you're potentially overpowered or outstrengthed or outmatched in some way physically. I mean, that's where the majority of martial arts, kind of found their feet once they weren't needed for warfare. So, Jiu-Jitsu comes from being able to deal with someone in bad situations and reverse those situations, fighting off your back, fighting against someone that's got maybe, better physical attributes than you. A wrestler is about controlling someone who is very much the same size as you. It's a strict weight class rule, a strict weight class sport. And it's about being, finely tuned and well conditioned to control an individual and pin someone within a particular bracket of time. So the way that they transfer over to MMA, if you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, you might find yourself put in bad positions by a wrestler, but be able to work sweeps and, elevate with butterfly hooks and understand how to utilize underhooks to create scrambles. And, there are lots of different tools at your disposal to keep a fight moving and keep moving in the direction of a finish. If you're a wrestler, it's more about controlling someone and then instigating a finish out of that control. So if I've taken someone down, and I'm a good wrestler, which I'm not, so I'm speaking objectively here. Like if I taken someone down, now it's my choice as to whether I force them to turn into a submission, or I beat them up until the referee stops it, or I can stop them with strikes. Jiu-Jitsu is much more of a problem solver. Wrestling is much more of a problem creator. Wrestling is there to create problems consistently from your opponent and to tire them out and make them work and force them to do things that are not offensive in any way. They're working purely defensive. Jiu-Jitsu is much more about being defensive until you can be offensive. So they come from different ends of the spectrum. One thing I will add on the end of that is that the cage, the fence, and the angles that the octagon provides is alien territory for everybody, no matter what discipline you come from. Even if you're boxing or kickboxing, you're still working in a ring which is square. So you're working with 90-degree angles, whereas in a cage, in an octagon particularly, you're working in you've got 135-degree angles for each corner. It's a massive angle, but it's an angle that can be utilized and manipulated if you understand how to do it. And we're starting to see a few fighters understand the space now. But there's a consistency at the moment in the sport where a lot of fighters are quite happy to fight off the fence if they're not confident in their wrestling, because their takedown offense against the fence is something entirely different to their takedown offense out in the open, where they can be double-legged and power doubled and elevated. Masvidal is a great example of this. He doesn't mind fighting with his back foot against the fence if he's fighting someone that's going to shoot consistently, because then they're only shooting him into the fence where he's working his takedown offense. And that is an alien game for anybody, no matter whether you're a wrestler or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. So that's just something to bear in mind when you're watching fights in the near future. Takedown defense against the fence, I think, maybe something we should score as a separate stat, because I think some fighters would have a much higher takedown defense score if it was specifically against the fence.